Morning.
Good morning.
Councillor Parmar, and I just noticed that I didn't have my mic on.
Yeah, good morning. I couldn't hear anything, so thank you.
I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. I pressed the wrong button. I will next, before we consider today's agenda, I'll ask all members of council present if they have any pecuniary or conflicts of interest to declare regarding any of the items to be discussed. A pecuniary interest exists when an item could monetarily affect a member of council, their employer, or family member. A conflict of interest exists when an item could affect a private interest of a member of council, their employer, or family member. Do any members of council have a pecuniary or conflict of interest to declare? Hearing no pecuniary or conflict of interest, we'll move to the adoption of the agenda. Councillor Morgan?
I'll move that we adopt the March 2nd, 2026 agenda.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none, please vote.
We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. If I can get a motion to approve the minutes.
I can motion to approve the minutes from January 19th, 2026 Community and Public Services Committee.
Thank you very much. Any errors, omissions? Hearing none, please vote.
We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. And that is carried. We do have a couple council protocol recognition items. And Councillor Morgan, do you want to begin?
Sure. I'm pleased to share that March is Alberta Francophone Month. This is a chance to highlight the presence and diversity of Francophone communities across the province. It's also an opportunity to showcase the work of Francophone organizations that are helping make Edmonton a more prosperous and vibrant place to live. These groups work hard to preserve French culture and language, which fosters connection, meaning, and understanding across generations and communities. Alberta has a rich Francophone history, and many of the first settlers being French-Canadian. French was the first European language spoken in Alberta, and it's estimated that more than 9% of Albertans are of French or French-Canadian ancestry. To commemorate this legacy, Edmonton hosts and supports many festivals, events, and local businesses, including the Flying Canoe Volant, La Fête Franco-Albertaine, and Les Sept, as well as businesses in the French Quarter. All of these successfully celebrate French heritage and share the importance of bilingualism. And we continue to see an influx of French-speaking newcomers from all around the world. That's why one of our city priorities is to promote multiculturalism and build safer, more inclusive communities that welcome people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds. I thank the many leaders who share this beautiful language with all of us and for helping Edmonton maintain its deep Francophone roots. And I encourage Edmontonians to find this time of month to explore all that our French community has to offer. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. I'd also like to recognize that this coming Sunday is International Women's Day. On March 8, cities around the world raise awareness about discrimination and take action to advance gender parity. International Women's Day invites us to reflect not only on progress, but also on participation. It is both a celebration and a call to action. This year's theme, Give to Gain, reminds us that giving is not limited to time or resources. It can be a choice to speak up and call out stereotypes, challenge discrimination when it shows up in everyday spaces, or make room for voices that have been overlooked. As individuals, we can give support by sharing knowledge, celebrating successes, and extending opportunities. Our city is incredibly lucky to be home to countless residents and organizations working to mitigate issues that disproportionately impact women, girls, and non-binary individuals. Contributing to these local organizations helps create more equitable systems and stronger communities. On behalf of City Council, I commend the many women, men, and non-binary individuals in Edmonton who've pushed progress forward and taken a stand against discrimination. I want to especially thank the members of the Women's Advisory Voice of Edmonton, the WAVE Committee, for sharing their unique perspectives and experiences with City Council. Their insight is helping us ensure inclusion throughout our operations, and their contributions remind us that inclusive leadership requires intentional effort. I urge all Edmontonians to reflect on the small actions they can take today to help open doors for others. And I encourage everyone to participate in International Women's Day by celebrating the people building a better future for women in our city. Thank you. Okay, next we will go on to selecting items for debate. Councillor Rutherford.
I will select item 8.1.
And seeing that that is our only item, there's no reports not selected for debate. I don't see any requests to speak. Nothing specific time on the agenda. Any councillor inquiries?
Sorry, we do have to, we can vote on the 5.5 items on the reports not selected for debate.
That will come up in the request to reschedule.
Oh, okay.
I'm just going by the agenda. Any councillor inquiries? Okay, reports to be dealt with at a different meeting. There are none. And there's request to schedule reports. And I'm sorry, clerk, this was approved in the agenda. We don't need to vote on this, do we?
The request to reschedule, so I do believe that we could go back to, selection, or point 2.2 to vote on the approval of the revised due dates.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought we wait on that. Okay, thank you, Councillor Rutherford. My apologies. So, okay, if we can vote on the reports not scheduled for debate, that would be 5.1 and 5.2.
Councillor Principe is a yes.
Welcome, Councillor Principe.
We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. And that is carried. We have no unfinished business, no public reports, no responses to councillor inquiries. So we will head into 8.1, 2025 election signage. Do we have a presentation from administration?
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Flaman. I'm the Deputy City Manager for Community Services. We are here today to respond to a motion regarding election signs for the 2025 municipal election. We do not have a presentation, but we do have a number of staff available to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think because Councillor Rutherford selected this item, it's a result of her motion. I think she might have some questions.
I do, but my e-scribe is being funny. That's why I was going to the clerk there. I just have this screen, so I can't pull up my agenda, my report that I put notes in.
Oh, shoot, okay.
So this is the, because it's just showing like this right now. Like I have access to stop people from speaking or not. So it's fun, but I have all the power, but I can't actually look at my agenda to, my report to look at my notes.
Are we getting some technical help with that?
Can I just
or-
suggest maybe just log out of it, turn your machine off. Sometimes eScribe gets stuck. And you definitely put them in e-scribe, not diligent? Yeah. Okay. I would just log out of it completely, clear the screen, shut your eye, and just, if you want to recess for a couple of minutes, I think we're happy to wait.
I think I could start with a few questions that I remember while I'm trying to do multitasking here. No, it's okay. Can I just get some information first and foremost on when that Elections Act legislation came into force? That is mentioned in the report.
Yeah, it was July of last year.
And so how come council did not receive any amendments to the public spaces bylaw in advance of the election?
Yeah, I think the changes that came, there was an omnibus bill that was passed very late. As far as, I can't speak to all of the other amendments that were in the bill, but I know that we did discuss if we were going to bring that forward as part of the fall repealing bylaw with just everything that was going on. We just did not have the time. And we were just processing this new information with, I think it was 90 days before the election, and so in discussions with our partners, we decided to have this come forward as part of the spring repealing bylaw.
I did not recall seeing any memo on this as well in advance of the elections, so there was no communication on this change, so it would have created a lot of confusion for people thinking there's all these rules in place that in fact didn't exist, and then we're wasting resources on 311 complaints and all of these other things for stuff that is not enforceable.
I think there are still certain circumstances in which there are issues with signs being put on road right-of-way
that's roadway
create
stuff, right?
that
That's
create
different.
a safety concern. So we still need to field some of those.
Is that what because 240 seemed really small for the number of complaints, and I know that my office was receiving it. I would have expected a much higher proportionate number than 240 in terms of the total number of 311 complaints. So was 240 only the ones that were related to what was enforceable, was actually enforceable?
Well, sometimes it's a matter of the officers having to go out and assess the situation on site, and so that's the total of the 311 complaints that we fielded.
So is that the total number of 311 complaints received, or is that is including duplicates?
It looks like, according to the report, we had 22 duplicate complaints of the complaints that came into us. We did 240 investigations.
But no proactive work. So in the new legislation, what is allowable and what's not allowable? So obviously road right-of-way, you can still do some kind of enforcement on, if I understand correctly. Correct? So if it's like blocking sight lines, creating a safety issue?
I think I'd need somebody from legal services to weigh in on Bill 54 as to whether it oversteps
Is there somebody from
anything.
legal online?
Yep.
Okay.
Councillor Rutherford, Janet Bonner with Legal Services. I can certainly weigh in on that. Bill 54 amendment speaks directly to election signs and election regulations. So enforcement can continue for safety-related signs.
So safety, and that's the discretion of the bylaw officer to determine what is safety-related.
The bylaw does guide the officer as well. There are regulations that would guide an officer's discretion.
Such as?
The section does go into details as to the safety concerns that the officer should be looking at. I believe that section 65 goes into details.
But is that what are we repealing then? Because I know we didn't get to it because it was pulled for debate and it got postponed to the next council meeting, but it was on the agenda for the 17th, 18th. Aren't those guidelines getting repealed?
The election sign guidelines are being repealed.
Okay, but
specifically
general temporary sign guidelines will still be able to guide the
Yeah,
discretion of the bylaw officer.
as it is prescribed in the bylaw. So the regulations in the bylaw that speaks to safety concerns and signs will continue to be enforceable.
Okay, I'll go another round, thanks.
Thank you. So those safety concerns would be like putting them like too close to the intersection, center medians.
So anything that could result in damage to the public space, creating a hazard for pedestrians or any public space user, anything that resembles, confuses the meaning of or obstructs a traffic safety or a traffic control device.
Like stop here or something?
Yeah, those are the items that are listed more generally for all signs.
Okay. What about signs that end up on the roadway where people can puncture their tires?
Well, I think at that point it just becomes road debris and it would be picked up.
Okay. But as far as election signs go, would that be reason to ticket, or no, we can't?
Neil, are you online that you want to weigh in on that one with respect to signs that are on the roadway?
Good morning. Yes, I can weigh in on that. I can say that if a sign ended up on the roadway, we would not be able to establish who put it there or how it ended up there. So identifying a person to hold culpable for that would be difficult. There was a situation that we actually knew it was placed there with intent on the roadway, and we could establish that in court proceedings. Yes, we would be able to take action on that. That would be difficult to do.
Okay, but it wouldn't be whoever sign it was wouldn't be liable for it automatically. It would be whoever, you would have to determine who put it on the roadway.
I definitely defer to legal advice on that, but from my point of view, no, they would not be liable to something that we couldn't prove they did.
Okay, thank you. Legal?
Yes, Councillor, I could just echo that when it has to do with determining who would place the signs, that is not something that enforcement may be able to achieve if they just find it on the roadway. However, as long as it's a safety concern or safety hazard, they will be able to take action with respect to removing the hazard. And perhaps further investigations can go in to determine who did it, but that would be something that would be challenging, I believe, for enforcement.
Okay, thank you. And then I just, with the number of complaints, that's only through 311, or is that also through the election office?
Sorry, I was getting some mail from a counselor's office. If you could repeat the question, please.
I'm just wondering, what's in the report is just the complaints through 311. Did the election office receive complaints as well?
We do receive phone calls and then we send them over to 311, so everything's tracked through a single source. Edmonton Elections does not answer questions about complaints. That's all managed through the central source. So all of the stuff that we get sent over to 311.
Okay, so and if the caller or complainant doesn't bother to call 311, then we have no record of it.
Yeah, I did talk to the team. We did not receive a lot of complaints. We do get lots of inquiries, and we do get lots of other kinds of inquiries, but not election sign related. We also did an information session to help people be informed about where to make those calls, so people were informed right off the bat to contact 311.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. That's all I have. Councillor Rutherford?
Yeah, thank you. So what about, are we still able to restrict like signs on public fencing, or no? So like if there's a public park with a fence, I'm thinking about a few that I saw, chain link fences that were public property where there was signs on them throughout the election. Are we not allowed to, we're not allowed to enforce that now by the legislation?
Councillor Rutherford, Janet Afona again with Legal Services. The specific section under the public spaces bylaw does regulate signs on the highway. So signs on fences would not fall within that category. And based on the recommendation
But what
before
about
you,
signs on fences in parks? Like, let's say Lauderdale Dog Park has a chain link fence.
and that goes to the second point of if it is an election sign, then based on the recommendation, we would not be able to enforce that.
Okay, and then the Elections Act also changed the campaign period to be 4 years. So we're already in the campaign period for 2029 technically,
The
correct?
Local Authority Election Act was changed. The campaign period is 4 years, not
Yeah.
the Election Act.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry.
I just keep the two things very distinct, but great.
No, I'm glad you clarified for me. So, because before we used to say like no signs until, you know, kind of a really tight period after the nomination day closed. Are we going to potentially see now signs at any point in the next 4 years? Like there's no time period on
So
that.
you're 100% right. The campaign period is now 4 years and it just started, so we can start taking notice of intent as of January 1st, 2026. The ability to put a sign on private property has not changed.
Well, no,
That
absolutely.
still does, but the rules around putting out, or rules that the city can put in place to restrict election signs has been changed in the Election Act, which is why we're here not here before you today, but why we put it in the repealing bylaw. So the landscape has changed in two ways.
But in theory now, people could put up election signs as of now on park space for 2029.
I'll defer to law, but I don't believe that we are allowed to put campaign stuff on transit buses, transit stations, or in public parks. You're not allowed to campaign or to put election signs there.
Okay, so that's still, the parks are still covered.
I think there's two separate things, where you can campaign and what you can do with signs
But
are
then
a
they
bit
just,
too
but I was
too
just
different.
told that you couldn't enforce a sign on Lauderdale Park fence. That's a park space,
I don't know who owns that fence.
the city.
You can't advertise on city property in that regard.
Okay, but that's not what legal just said to me in the same line of questioning.
I can weigh in on that again, Councillor Rutherford. So there are other sections of the bylaw that deal with how you could place signs, other signs related to like on public spaces and public space fixtures. I believe those are the sections that we would be looking at. But when it has to do with election signs specifically, what we do not want to do is regulate it under the bylaw, which is what the province has said shouldn't be done.
So is there any strengthening that we need to make in terms of what our bylaw says about signage writ large?
The bylaw does contain, like, I believe the bylaw has extensive regulations already on signs more generally that can be applied. But with respect to your specific questions as to a sign on a fence, that's private property, and that's something that we would have to look into the specific situation to see what section can be used there. But we do have extensive regulations in the bylaw that deals with signs already, generally, more broadly.
But the fence is publicly owned in this scenario. What can happen with that? It's a park space, the fence is publicly owned. It is a City of Edmonton maintained fence.
And the
Can
bylaw
people
does,
put signs?
so the bylaw does say that you cannot place without the consent of the owner. So for that particular scenario where it is a public space owned by the city without the city's consent, then it would be enforceable.
Okay, I'm gonna have to come for another round.
Okay. Anybody else with questions? No? Then Councillor Rutherford.
So just on that same, oh, John,
I was just going to ask you, how does the city give that consent to allow for a sign on their fence? Legal, I guess, or whoever.
We don't.
Okay. We don't give
That doesn't mean, and I'm guessing, hypothetically speaking, that sometimes candidates or their teams put signs where they shouldn't be.
Yeah, Section 64 of the Public Spaces Bylaw with respect to public space fixtures says a person must not place a marking on or attach a sign, sticker, decal, or poster to any public space fixture except for a public space fixture designed and intended for such use, and it continues on. So that's different than signs on the highway, which is what we were talking about with election signs with respect to signs on the side of the road.
So that's enforceable then. We can, bylaw can come and take it down, fine, whatever.
Well, again, I'll turn to legal because of the complications with the provincial bill.
Councilor Morgan, that is enforceable, and that section actually continues to say without the permission of the owner. So that is where we would be enforcing on that basis. So bylaw doesn't have to determine whether or not it is an election sign. What we cannot do is regulate it in the bylaw with respect to highway, and that's something that we're recommending to be removed. But as it relates to public space fixtures and other signs that are broadly regulated in the bylaw, enforcement can continue without having to determine what type of sign it is.
Okay, sounds good. I'll let my colleague continue to answer questions after I'm done here. But I'm gonna, since I have you, I do have a question about private property. I heard stories of candidates using the first few meters of somebody's property for their signs without permission. Is that something that the city allows? Like just kind of near the curb?
No, I think, and I'll defer to law, but I think to just reiterate, if you're going to, if anybody's going to put a sign up of any description on private property, you need permission of the owner.
Where does that private property start?
We are stretching outside the bounds of my knowledge, so I'll defer to that question to legal about, but the property, if it's in front of your house and you don't want the sign there, then you just remove it.
Does legal want to weigh in?
Yes, Councillor Morgan, I can weigh in. What we do have defined in the bylaw is what a public space is. Unfortunately, we did not put in what is not private property, but we can certainly, when we receive maybe an enforcement concern, look into the lines, the property lines, to determine whether it was clearly a public space or private property.
Is it if I have a sidewalk in front of my house and then a bit of grass, is that my property? Would that be considered my property, or is that in between the sidewalk and the road?
You mean the boulevard? No, that would be city property.
So somebody could potentially, if there was enough space between the road and the sign, they could put a sign in front of my house on that boulevard.
Councillor Morgan, if it is a public space, then yes, and then we would be able to enforce it, because a public space is defined in very broad terms that says whether it is privately owned, as long as it is publicly accessible. So yes, if it is private property but it's a public space, then we would be able to look into the public spaces bylaw to see how we can enforce it. Again, it has to go back to safety concerns and whether the consent of the city, which we do not give, was received, and we have to look into the lines of how we can enforce that without really regulating election signs per se.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Councillor Rutherford?
So given that, we've talked a lot in the audit committee about education, clearly this is confusing even for us. We've had since July, and I'd say that there's still a little bit of fuzziness around this. How is Elections Edmonton planning to educate candidates or work on this to create some clarity on this piece?
So step one is for council to repeal, assuming that bylaw repealing goes through. Edmonton Elections works really closely with community standards to share information about where it is safe to put signs up. So we did post the regulations, or sorry, not the regulations, the guidelines on our website. We did a joint webinar, which was widely watched. It's something we did in 2021. We also did it in 2025, and we do provide information to candidates. When candidates in front of voting stations step outside the bounds of what's acceptable under my authority, we do send people out from our team to just go pick up the signs, but again, it's the responsibility of the candidates to follow the rules and the best practices. This is a change that we will have to get clear, work with bylaw to make sure that the rules are not only understood by our team, but also by bylaw for 2029.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say one thing I was disappointed in, and I've talked about the culture, is the lack of any tickets being given at all. I think there was clear examples based on what legal said, even with that there was clear violations that were safety concerns, that were in park spaces, that we had no tickets issued. I hope that's not a culture that we continue, because as speaking as someone that was a candidate, I was very informed about what the rules were and what the rules are not. And I would go to your GBA plus analysis, which I think is super weak for the record, in that it only talks about how ticketing would be potentially bad for people that don't have income. But when we allow people to flagrantly not follow our bylaws and put up big signs because we know name recognition is what wins elections, you are allowing people with the most money and the most ability to actually influence the election. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I am concerned about the fact that there was no tickets issued whatsoever.
I think on this file, like any of the other files that we have when it comes to ticketing, that's a last resort as we talk about the 4 E's of enforcement for us with respect to education and encouragement.
So what direction does enforcement need to not, because I agree that the 4 E's are great when we have a new bylaw that comes into place, when there's fuzziness and murkiness. So I get it for this last election period. There is a point though, when we are still doing that with people that are, like, for example, infill developers, that this isn't their first rodeo. Candidates and political parties where it's not their first rodeo. At what point do we say, like, that there has to be, if everybody just knows they're just going to get a finger wag, what's the incentive to actually follow the rules? And how do we give better direction then on what we need as an enforcement culture in this city?
I think we have to maintain officer discretion at all costs. I think anytime, if we were to suggest doing a zero tolerance approach, I'm not sure that would be the right approach either.
No, I don't think we need to go to zero tolerance, and I'm definitely not suggesting that. But I think we've gone from zero tolerance to full tolerance. Like, this clearly shows, like, I bet you of those 240 investigations, if I was to ask you how many candidates were primary culprits of these 240, and I don't want answers, I don't want names, I'm guessing it wouldn't be 240, separate candidates that have done all of those things. It would be a handful of candidates that were flagrantly breaking those rules.
I think that's fair. I think all of the signs are put up in a very short time period, and so if it's one offense or 15 offenses, it may be kind of the same offense because it was all done during the same time period, and so maybe one course correction is all it takes with engagement and that kind of escalating approach.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. I think that's an interesting question. Do you have record of wards or candidates that received the most complaints?
We don't share publicly anybody involved in any of our investigations, whether it's for this or anything else.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Did anybody have a motion on this? Okay, so we are no longer just motioning to be received for information, from what I understand from Mayor Knack. So if no other questions, I guess that does it. Clerk, yes? Okay.
Yeah,
It
your
just
call,
seems
yeah.
really odd that, and so no further direction or anything is needed in regards to the public spaces bylaw? Nothing at all?
No,
Okay.
it's on council's agenda for further discussion.
All right then. So we're done with that then. There's no private reports. There's no motions pending that I'm aware of. Notices of motion or motions without customary notice. Anyone? No? We are adjourned at 10:06.